Welcome, everyone, to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Cholwe Mandona
and Zelda Wasau.
And we are excited to have you here. So, welcome, guys, to another episode of the Feminine Outliers. Today's episode is on the value of education. How far should we really go with our education? So it's a really interesting topic, and I thought it would be a great idea to talk about it, especially with our African backgrounds, and seeing how far we have come, right? And so I'm excited to talk about it and see what we come up with. I'm excited to hear what Zale has to say on this. And yeah, I think it will be a great discussion. But before that, we are going to talk about our and learning segments. So let's get right ahead. So I have my unlearning piece, what I have been unlearning this week. And I am unlearning that people are mind readers. I also want to add. I know. I actually want to add a little bit on that. It's not just mind readers. People are emotion readers. And that's just not the case. And the idea that we should expect people to know how we think and how we feel is something that I've just learned that it's just something to grow out of, and just realize that if you want a particular action from someone, just say what you want, or just express what you're feeling. Really just express yourself, because assuming that someone knows how you feel or what you're thinking, it just wastes time. People will not get it, and then there's just so much pressure put on another person to have gotten you or understood you, and making permanent decisions based on assumptions is just not going to lead to anything positive. I don't know. So that's my unlearning.
It's a very mature, well thought of unlearning.
Thank
Because
you.
it's very true, though. I mean, okay, when you say that, something really came into mind. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I hate it when people do that. Like, particularly, and I like the fact that you included emotions, reading your emotions, like emotion readers, because it's true. Sometimes people assume you understand what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and then when they realize that you don't, it's shocking, and it's like, why is it shocking? Like, I'm not you.
Yeah.
We look at the world from different perspectives, so it shouldn't surprise you that something that would trigger you, or you're responding to something like this, would be different from the way I respond to something like that. So I think it's such a solid reminder to all of us too, because I'm pretty sure we also do it to other people sometimes, which you kind of expect. You should know what I'm thinking, or you should figure this out. But then you have to realize, no, you have to say, this is where communication 101 comes into play. And you have to really be good at saying what you feel, what you think, because you cannot assume that someone else will. Now, sometimes the people will, but I mean, you can't assume that. So I like that. It's like just a good reminder to all of us. I like it.
Yeah, it's very short, precise, but it's just something that I just learned this week, and it's just, yeah, as you said, a good reminder that we need to learn how to keep expressing ourselves, and be very clear on how we're feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, that's my unlearning. What are you unlearning, Zell?
What am I learning is a bit funny.
Oh,
But what
I'm
am I
even laughing
learning?
before I don't. I don't even know what it is, but I'm already laughing. Okay,
Am I
this is gonna be
learning
good.
that common sense is common sense? Because common sense is not common sense. And I will explain this. Um, and this can apply in so many different aspects of life.
Okay.
What you think is normal, it's kind of similar
Yeah.
to your thing. I can kind of relate it to what you're saying. But what you think is, okay, this should be like how you think. This is how it's done. This is what is supposed to happen. Someone else, you can't assume someone else will automatically assume the same thing or think about that. And the
Mm.
reason why I'm saying this is because I had a patient's family member. He basically doesn't want the patient to be discharged because he's like, how can I discharge my patient when we don't even know, like, we haven't set up management with orthopedic surgery for her outside of the hospital. We haven't. Have you had cardiology in the hospital talked to her cardiologist in the office?
Mm.
Have you talked to all the outpatient providers and blah blah blah? And then I'm like, does this person hear themselves speaking? I work in the
Mm.
hospital. Why am I contacting outpatient providers if I don't need them? And then
Mm.
why am I supposed to, how are we supposed to set up appointments for you? Outpatient. Like basically everything he was saying was for outpatient stuff.
Mm.
And for me, I'm like, patients should get it's in my head, I'm like, it should be obvious. Like we cannot like my job is to treat you. Do you want me to be hunting down all your doctors outside of the hospital, knowing how hard it is to get a hold of them anyways,
Mm.
instead of treating you? And so, but then I
Mm.
had to stop and realize sometimes, people don't realize it. Like he might not actually, I think when I explained it to him and I was like, it's not our duty to do that. And then two, I was like, I didn't even get cardiology on board here. Why do I need them on board for a surgery that you're going to do when you're outside of the hospital that's not under my care? So I think
Right.
when I explained it to him is when he finally was like, oh, okay. He realized like, okay, he can't get, there's no way anything's changing over here. But sometimes I get really irritated because I've had this kind of similar situation with a lot of family members. People will just assume. And I'm like, this is not how the
Mm.
healthcare system works. You have to realize, I'm like, do you really want your doctor who's taking care of you in the hospital running after things outside of the hospital instead of taking care of you in the hospital? Because, I mean, time is of the essence. And but then I stopped
Mm.
to realize they probably have a viewpoint of this is how medicine should be. And so
Yeah.
if you don't explain it to them, they may not know it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I was saying I'm unlearning that common sense is common sense, because to me that's common sense. Like, why are you asking me stuff to do with outpatient? I don't care unless it has something to do with you being inpatient. And unless in the
Mm-hmm.
rare instance in which I actually need to reach out to an outpatient provider because it affects the care inpatient. But if it doesn't, in my head, I'm like, I don't need to. But I have
Mm.
to understand where these people are coming from also. They also are not coming from my perspective. They don't see it from
Yeah.
my side. So I have to learn that it's just, hey, stop thinking like that. And no, I have to realize this is where they're coming from. This is their expectations. And even if the expectations might be a little bit misguided, it's okay to
Mm-hmm.
guide them back to the right expectations. So, and it's just funny because I know the whole common sense is not common sense thing, and I'm sure we've talked about something similar before. So I
Mm-hmm.
know it, but it just doesn't. Like sometimes when you're in these situations, you're just like, why? And then you have to
Right.
remind yourself. But again, you're coming from different perspectives, different viewpoints. and you have been exposed to different things. So he doesn't see this other side of medicine. He's just seeing the
Mm-hmm.
side of, oh, I'm the customer or I'm this, and this is how I think doctors should be. But then he realizes just because you think doctors should be like that doesn't mean that's how they are. And I also have to realize that just because I think patients should be like this, their family members should be like this, does not mean they have to be like that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's very wise, Dr. Zell. Um, because you're reminding me, I think I've said this on this podcast, is I don't like the phrase, oh, it's pretty simple. You just do this and this and this. And the word, it's
Mhm.
just when you assume that when you're giving instructions to someone to follow and you try to imply that it is simple and you don't even maybe know where the person is coming from, making the judgment that is simple is not, for me, is not accurate. Just give the instructions and try and see where the person is at,
Mhm.
because that person might struggle literally on step one and there are 10 steps and you're just like, why is this person still struggling on step one? And I've noticed that it could make that person feel pressured to know the steps, and then they'll try and be impressive, and then when you get back to see whether they've done the job the way you expected them to do the job, they literally have done something totally different. And in your mind you think, I literally gave them simple, quote unquote, simple instructions. So yeah, I don't like that phrase. And also, I'm not sure if you um, aware, but definitely there have been discussions around people being what they call neurodivergent. So people who just neurodiversity. So people who don't think typically like what is common, I guess, quote unquote common,
Mhm.
neurodiversity. So that has become, it's becoming uh, I wouldn't say a trend, but people are being made known that not everyone thinks the same way as you do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, and people process information differently. And yeah, so what people might think, oh, this person is slow, it's just the way they process information. Some people process information differently and how they take in information. Some people like pictures over text, some people like audio over text. So there's just all these uh, ways that people think and process. So
Mhm.
I do like the unlearning. Common sense, yeah, yeah, just the
The
unlearning
common
that,
sense is common sense.
and unlearning common sense is common sense.
Yeah, the question is,
Um,
what is common sense?
I was actually thinking about that. I was like, I was trying to figure out like when people say that, what is common sense? It's almost this idea that everyone should see things the same way. Like it's just,
Mhm.
maybe it's like it's just too simplistic that there's no way you can get it another way. Maybe
Mhm.
is that the thing, that like there's literally no way you can think something else but this thing. Like the next step is this thing.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, yeah, I know, but honestly, but I believe there's an infinite ways of doing things and thinking. So, yeah, wow, good one
That's
though.
true. I agree with that.
Good one. I like that. That's very wise and deep in a way. But they
Although in the
yeah.
moment you're just like cringe, cringe, annoyed, annoyed, then you're like, stop, stop it, Zelda, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you like, because the other thing I just thought about was that I don't like repeating things. Like my mind
Mm.
doesn't like it. It almost is like, wait, you've seen that before. Why are you doing that? Why are you seeing that again? Or why are you repeating yourself? So it almost, having to repeat myself is almost like the way I feel about small talk, where I'm just like, there's a part of me that feels like I could be doing other things. Like, why am I having to do this again? My mind likes efficiency, so I just get, it's not frustrated, but it's just like there's this part of me that has to come down and realize, like, no, you know, calm down, it's okay, just repeat yourself and move on. I I don't know if you have the same experience on that, but yeah.
Yeah, no. Particularly if you feel like you're repeating yourself to a brick wall. Like you're like, why did this person not getting it? Particularly if someone's being stubborn, they're not trying to see your point of view or something. That's when I get frustrated. Like,
Mm,
and then sometimes you just like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. But yeah,
mm.
no. And repeating myself is very common, and it's very common in medicine.
Oh,
Get
nice.
used
You're
to it.
very, oh,
It
bless
still
your
annoys
heart.
you.
You're I was just about to say, bless your heart. Oh, you're very patient. Nice, nice one. Okay. Speaking about thinking, we're going to dive into our next topic, which is the value of education.
Hmm.
Um, so, we are obviously at this point in our lives professionals, professional engineer, medical doctor, and earlier in our podcast, actually the first two episodes of this podcast, we talk about our journeys to get to the points that we are at, and of course we had to go through training. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously the basic education, when I call it say basic, K to 12, and then we moved across the ocean to come to the United States, where we got our formal education. I got mine in engineering. Zil, you had to do pre-med, and then from pre-med you had to go through residency, no, yeah, medical school, yeah, medical
Med
school.
school. Hmm. And
And
then
then
residency.
oh, bless your heart again. So as you can see, I'm even missing steps here. This is how much education you had to do to get to this point. And then I went on with I started off with a bachelor's in chemical engineering, and then I did a master's in civil. Um, and then after that, I still had to work on my licensure for pretty much, I want to say, 4 years before I officially got licensed. So that's a lot.
Mm.
Um, a lot of schooling. Um, but the question that I want to pose to everyone, and to Zell and to myself, is how far should we go with this idea of education? Um, and I ask this question because growing up, it was the one thing that was drilled in my head. You need to go to school. You need to work hard. You need to get good grades. You need to, um, yeah, you just need to do good. And then after that, you go to, I guess, college. And then again in college, you work hard. You get good grades. Um, and yeah, and I was just thinking, because I'm at the point where I'm at, I'm discovering other things in the world that I was never exposed to. I mean, things like financial education, real estate, how to buy a house, what you need to buy a house. I mean, the value of credit, um, even just as simple as like learning how to dance, the different types of dance you can learn, salsa, bachata, like tango, like there's just so much to learn. And
Hmm.
then I was just thinking, what is the how far and or how limited have I been because I've pursued formal education for so long? Um, and is there any limitation in that? So, yeah, that's where I'm coming from. Any initial thoughts, Zell, on this?
Um, my initial thought was by, how far is too far for education kind of thing is, what do you mean by education? That was my initial
Mm,
thought. But that's me now. Because you just
mm,
literally touched onto something that I was like, I'm hoping Chole touches on this is more than just formal education. So I
mm,
think education is there's nothing wrong with education at all. But I'm saying that because it depends on what type of education. Because there's so much
okay.
out there, as you said. But growing up, just like you, it was more so formal education that was talked about, in my circles. And I mean, I my dad has a PhD, so
Mm,
I already had and then my mom went to university as well. So my parents both were well educated, and I already had that background, because I know my well, my at least my dad, his parents were not educated.
mm,
So he was like the first, like kind of like a first generation thing. But for me, I had him. I could see him and how him and my mom, like, went to school and stuff like that. So I mean, I didn't see them go to school because I wasn't born.
mm.
But anyways, I saw,
I can't.
but at least I could see they were educated. And
Yeah.
um, for me, it always I could tell, like, there's my parents always like, work hard, do well in school, get your education so that you can at least be, somewhat successful in life. And I understand where they were coming from, because growing up in Kenya, growing up in an African country, growing up in a third world country, for a lot of
Mm,
people, getting a good, a somewhat decent life is dependent on education. Because
mm,
in a lot of these other systems that are not first world, where simply you just need your basic needs met, we
mm,
don't have time for wants. And wants are where, in my opinion, other education stuff falls into place.
mm,
Like, I feel like formal education kind of can be considered a need,
mhm,
because it's like a basic thing for a lot of people to just make it out there if you come from less developed countries. So
mhm,
that's how my dad was able to make it out, because he was educated and he's able to get good jobs, and that's how he's able to make it out of poverty. So
mm,
that was so I knew that education was really important, and at least getting a fast degree so I could get a job and stuff like that. And growing up in Kenya, like, education is huge. Like, everyone's trying to get that PhD, to have that doctor on their name, or they want to be a lawyer, so they're called lawyer so and so, or engineer so and so. They're all
mhm.
about, like, titles, which I think is nonsense. But anyways, I just feel like I so there's this whole, formal education system is so important in Kenya. Like, going to school,
Mhm,
um, the Kenyan system is pretty tough, in my opinion.
mhm,
Um, and I went through Kenyan system. I went through British system. I went through American system. Kenyan was the
mm,
toughest, and the British was close behind, and then American was the easiest. Um, and
mm,
I feel like you could see that they really value education. Like, even the schooling, there's all this hype about, you know getting that degree, getting to the best university you can. But that's because that's what
mm,
we know. That's our way out of poverty.
mm,
So that's what when I thought about, education, that's the first thing that came into my mind, because that's what most of us know. Now it's when you start coming to the US, and then, like, for me, when I came here, and as I kind of got out of, go to medical school and started growing up, essentially
mhm,
becoming an adult and being more independent, is when I started to realize there's other forms of education, as you said. You talks about dance. You talk about one thing we're passionate about, financial education. Um,
mhm,
there's so many different types of ways of getting educated out there that we're realizing now. But I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's because we've also had our formal education done. So that's down and
Yeah.
down path. And then now we have time to, like, I don't know, look up other
Expand.
education.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we grew up here, would we have I'm not sure how it is because I did not grow up here. But I'm wondering if
Yeah.
they have more of a balance. I think they have more of a balance between formal education and education
Mm-hmm.
of some of this other stuff because they have more extracurricular activities and things like that here simply because
Mm-hmm.
they can afford to, because they have surplus. It's like their basic needs are met, so they can afford to do these other things. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that you bring up some really good points there that I guess back home there are only so many moves you can make, and education is like the most common and straightforward path you can take to sort of get yourself in a better position.
And
Um,
secure in a way.
yeah, like a secure way, and it's and I think if you are a parent and you're trying to you're trying to figure out the success of your child, the first thing that's on your mind is take your child to school. I remember growing up just with my parents. It was such a big deal that they had to figure out school fees first. No matter what, it was like we need to pay for your school fees before you do anything, before anything else gets paid for. It was school fees, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is the biggest budget for a lot of African homes, school
Mm-hmm.
fees. Um, because trying to make it out and be successful back home without a formal education can be a bit of a challenge, or rather a challenge, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even risky, because you're not guaranteed success. Um, but now the other industries are obviously growing, like music industry, the film industry. So people who have talents outside formal education are creating a name for themselves and being recognized nationally, internationally. So,
Mm-hmm.
but again, not everyone can be in those industries. Um, and you said something about American education being easier than the British or Kenyan education systems, but I did find it easier, but for me, it was practical. Um, and
Mm.
when I made the switch from Zambia to the US, I actually struggled for a little bit because the American education system sort of just it just puts out like the questions weren't tough. It was just like, provide your thoughts. What do you think? And then initially I would be like, let me look for a textbook that says something. And it's like it took me a while to formulate my own ideas.
Mm.
Um, it just took me a while because I was so used to finding answers in the textbook.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone to just tell me like, what do you think about the US elections? Like your own thoughts, and give me your thoughts based on your understanding of theories, like political theories. And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. So, but if you asked me something that is like, let's say in chemistry, you asked me about the element sodium. Boy, like I had that memorized. I had the periodic table memorized, okay?
You know, Charlie. You know what you're saying, actually. So let me be more specific, because this is
Mm,
it's funny because I listened to I watched a podcast on YouTube, and they mentioned something like this. So let me clarify about the education system. Did
Mm,
you actually do American schooling before university?
no,
Okay.
no, I did
So
not.
I I think the American schooling before university is easier.
Okay.
But university it's a different ballgame. It's hard. And it's
Oh,
funny
okay.
because I watched this podcast and they were actually saying the similar thing in which university actually in America is hard because America has a lot of the world's best universities. So
Mm,
university is a different ball game. But when it comes to before university, some people were saying the American system actually is not the best when it comes to formal education because they feel like, I mean, that's what they were saying. And these are two people who grew up, who did high school in the US, but they're not like,
okay.
one of them is not from the US. One of them is Kenyan, but she grew up, she did high school here. And they were saying like the system here is not good, formal education before university. But when it hits
Mm,
university, it comes amazing because, they have the best universities in the world.
mm-hmm.
So that's what I would refer to because I also did American system a year before I came to the States. And I found it pretty easy, to be honest. I was enjoying
Mm,
it. But then what you're saying is so true because I also struggled. And it's interesting to hear you say that because I
mm,
also struggled. Because
mm.
education back home is how much can you memorize?
Yeah,
It's not can you critically think, it's how much
exactly.
can you memorize. So if you got your memorization down pat, you're good.
It
Now, the
was,
moment you have to stop and think, you're just like, what am I supposed to
yeah.
do? Because
No.
I struggle. This is why I'm not going to lie. I struggle with standardized test taking.
Mm,
I think it's because of the way my mind is so used to being trained.
mm-hmm.
Some of these test taking skills, I'm just like I struggle when I was taking the SAT, ACT, struggle hardcore
Mm-hmm.
because it was not, and it's not. And this is funny coming from an A-star student, and then I'm here
Mm-hmm.
struggling. And it's because
Mm.
I think it had a little bit of critical thinking. I don't know, or something like that, which
All
we're not
right.
used to. You don't have to think for ourselves. We just, as you know, memorize the periodic table, all
I was
elements.
like, all the elements, I got them down, girl. Like, I was in my chemistry exam being like, you know, this is the bomb.com. Like, this is great. Like, you know how, like, they give you the periodic table maybe, like, at the end of the exam?
Hmm.
I didn't even need that.
You
Like, I
didn't need
was like,
it.
I was set. I was so set. Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, but then when you just ask me like give me your thoughts like on anything, like just I give you my thoughts. Okay. So that was very interesting, right? Because as you said, critical thinking was missing at that point. Um but once I started to adopt that sort of mindset, that's when like the light bulb went off. And the light bulb went off and it was just eye opening as to like how the world is operating and how things work. Because I have to say, I think I was also very, because I lacked knowledge in these other fields, and thank God Miami was, what's the term that they use for a university that makes you do other subjects outside your major? Um, I forget there's a word for it.
There's a term for it. I thought that was common in all
No,
universities.
no, not necessarily. There's a term for it. Because I remember I had to do public speaking, theater, international relations, and I'm a chemical engineer, and I'm trying to do all of these
Uh,
things, and I was like,
are
liberal
you sure
arts,
that
liberal arts. It was a liberal
so?
arts.
Oh, Oh, so you're saying if
Uh,
a university doesn't have liberal arts, they don't have any, you wouldn't be able to do any of those?
I think that's the definition, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember people would
Oh.
say Miami University is a liberal arts education, and so I thought that meant, um, yeah, you get to do other subjects outside your major. So I don't,
Oh. I'll look
but
into that because my assumption is all universities have. I mean, they might not have all the classes liberal arts, but you can. I
mm,
think they always encourage you to do classes outside, at least one or two. Like
mm,
it's. I think it's part of the major, but I
oh,
don't know. That's what I always thought because
okay, we should. Hmm. Okay. We should check the. We should. Yeah, we should check. We should check and
we'll check
confirm.
later on. But you made me
And
think. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I just put you
Anyway,
off topic.
no, that's okay because I think that was pretty much that was my association. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected on it. Um, but this is where now my question, my initial question, comes to light in the sense that if you stick to that formal education and you keep going, like if I just kept memorizing the periodic table and I just kept on with being, let's say, a chemistry major, it looks like the trajectory of my career would be chemistry. And then let's say I decide to do a
Mm.
master's in chemistry, and then I'll decide to do a PhD in chemistry. And then, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, but then how would I have not known? Because, like, for me, the thing with that is I don't know if would have known that I really do enjoy being on stage and I enjoy public speaking. Because that's what I realized when I did my theater class, and our play with my team. Shout out to my old play theater team. Like, we were the best play, and I didn't know that I had it in me. I know. I was just so excited. Um, I didn't know I had it in me to act. Like, I'm just here trying to get my chemical engineering degree, knowing that there's some other talent, and that to me is just was eye opening. Um, and the actually another story for this is when I did my international relations class, and the professor would talk about how these countries are fighting with each other, and I'm like, seriously, people people are fighting over this. Like, I can't even remember which countries, but it was, to me, it was so hilarious, the reasons why countries were fighting, and I was just like, these guys need to grow up. There's just no way, like, just overpower you. You're gonna kill millions of people just for the sake of power. I was just so shocked, like, the world was running the way it was running. Um, and so that was also an eye opener about greed, power, like the people's need for significance. Um, so it was eye opening. And that to me is where I could say one point of, like, being limited to just formal, very strict, straight, and narrow formal education.
Uh, yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's very hard to avoid because it
Mm,
depends on where you grow up, the family you're born into, and all that. Because if all your parents taught you was formal education, like if that's all they
mm-hmm,
put all their eggs in that basket, they were like, you have to, formal education is so important. You'll grow up with that only until you get to the point where you're exposed to different things. Maybe like when you leave home or something, that'll probably be the first time you're able to experience something new. But until then, you don't have control over that. And also depending on which country you grow up in, as I mentioned earlier about formal education and how important it is in third world countries. um
mm.
So it just, I feel like that's why it just depends. It's a hard one because even for me, I was like doctor, 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 doctor. But then I wish I knew that I could do other majors other than just like I did kinesiology and health, which is exercise
Mm,
science. I honestly would have done international studies. Like I would have done
mm,
international studies, but still did my pre med requirements and still
mm-hmm,
applied to medical school because I didn't know you could do that.
mm,
Again, this is
yeah,
just some of the limitations you have because I didn't really necessarily have many people ahead of me I could look to who like went to medical school and stuff like that. So I didn't have that information, that
mm-hmm,
knowledge. But yeah, I think it just depends on that because also I don't know how it is in Zambia, but in back home in
mm-hmm,
Kenya, for people who have money, the if you can afford to go to richer schools, like the international schools, whether it's like British system, American system, French school, Korean school, this school, those kids tend to have a more balanced education in the sense that
mm,
they have a formal education, but they also have access to all these other extracurricular activities and all this other non-formal education. Um,
mm-hmm.
things that if you just went to a Kenyan system school, you wouldn't have because they would simply just focus on mostly like your formal education. So you find like if you have you heard of Montessori?
That sounds familiar.
It's like a kindergarten chain, international kindergarten chain. So there's a lot of like parents who like
Hmm,
taking their kids to Montessori because it's like creative juices, start spitting in your heads, when they're these kindergartens, and it's like they're trained in a different way than formal education way.
mm-hmm,
Um, so I see that happening, but it's for us in Kenya. It's mostly just people who can afford it and the wealthy and stuff. So they grow up not being so harped only on formal education, but it's also like you can try this, you can try that. But again, it's because they have money, so they can
mm-hmm.
afford to do some of these other things. If you don't have money, you're just going to be buried in your books and focused on your books only, because that's your only, you know, way out.
Yeah. No, and the thing that I was just thinking about is you asked the question like, would we have would we have gone the same route if we started our lives in the United States? And that's a very good question.
Mm.
Um, because I was thinking the thing of having those creative juices is you're not, especially if you're younger, you might overestimate how talented you are. Um, because
Yeah.
yeah, because there's maybe somebody else who has spent maybe I don't know more time on on the craft, and so sometimes it could be like let's say there's the Williams sisters in tennis. I don't know. This is sport, and they started so young. And then I'm here like at 18 being like, okay, I'm going to be a tennis player. And maybe it's not impossible, but the thing is like if I went out there and said, I'm not going to go to university, I'm not going to go to college because I'm going to become the world's best tennis player. It's like how well, I don't know how well I would have done to the Williams sisters at 18 when they started at 4 years old or however young they were. So that's my only thing about the creative side or the other forms of education. Um, I
Mm.
I guess with formal education, it gives you this like a fixed skill that you can
Mhm.
easily apply in the economy and make some money out of it. While the other forms of education, maybe the competition is very stiff, and you have to get yourself to a level of talent where everybody's willing to pay for your talent and see you play or see you watch or I mean watch you play or whatever. So yeah, that's where I see one I give one up for formal
From
education there.
education. Mm.
Yeah.
You know, for me, what I'm all about balance. And
Mm.
you know, I'm all about you can have it all.
Uh-oh, here we go. We can have it all, everything.
uh, for me, that's why I think it's a mix of having formal education and this non-formal is a good mix because
Mm.
there are people who can do extremely well on non-formal education, but again, you don't know. I'm leaning more towards um I know there's many people who are as successful with that, like obviously successful. Like you're
Mm.
just really talented singer and that's what you do. I mean, how many people are really talented singers and then they become pop stars and things like that? So
Mhm.
I think it needs to be a combination of both. Have a base, have
Mm.
at least a base of formal education and get your basic, like if it's your bachelor's, just get that base. But also have your non-formal education.
Mm.
So it's like once you get that base of bachelor's, at least you have something to fall back on in case your non-formal education doesn't work because it there's a chance it may. And I feel like this formal education is a security blanket.
Mm.
Um in a sense, I feel like it
Mhm.
gives you a little bit more security than the non-formal education ones do. The non-formal
Mhm.
education ones will only give you security once you've really like made it and you're doing well in whatever it is. But I
Mhm.
feel like you at least have that security blanket of a formal education, be it like bachelor's degree, but then you still have your non-formal stuff you're pursuing. I just think
Mhm.
having a mixture of both might be important. And maybe I'm saying that because I'm Kenyan. And so I see, back home, you kind of need at least a baseline education for that. But also just applying for jobs here in the States, I think you have more opportunities if you want I guess a corporate job or a relatively good paying job if you have like a first degree, um,
Mhm.
compared to if you just apply without a first degree.
Mhm.
Because I know there are a lot of entry level jobs here. That's a good thing about the US. That's why some people can survive without there are many people who can survive without a first degree here because you still can earn money. But the question is how much are you trying to earn and then what you're trying to do. So I think having a base is okay. But
Mm.
that's all I'm saying is having a base. Okay, do not
Mhm.
forget your other types of education. Like do it. Invest in your financial future. Invest in like for me, I'm doing my piano. Do
Mhm.
those things. The podcast.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
investing and learning about, podcasts and stuff because these other stuff can also really take you far. And I think that's the thing that blows our mind because right now, like if you look at the what is it influencer market and stuff, it's
Mm.
become so big. It's like a huge thing, but I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure there's still people who are like, wait a minute, your job is to do what? You're an influencer? I could see you know people in our parents generation
Mm.
being like, huh, you're an influencer? What's that? Find a real job because some of them have been told to find a real job.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
hey, times are moving, times are changing. They don't need to have the formal education you think they needed to have. They're doing something with something else, and I feel like it's cool. And they should keep
Mhm.
on learning and growing in that field. And
Mm.
yeah,
I'm just kind of like thinking of you like Zoe is, you're doing your thing being a doctor and you're like, okay, I am the next Beyonce. I'm just kind of thinking you like working on your Beyonce dream. It's like
I would say think about the successful podcaster. That's my dream.
okay,
Like
there we go.
I'm waiting to one day walk into my patient's room, and then they'll be like, "Wait a minute, aren't you?
Oh,
Don't you have a podcast?" And I'll be like,
yeah.
"Yes."
Ah. You'd be like, yes, girl. Yeah. Hashtag the feminine outliers. um, yeah, no, that does make sense though. Why not explore, especially if you're given that opportunity. But it also made me think about how, because I do know people that have actually gone all the way to achieve and attain a PhD. As you said, for example,
Mhm.
your dad did that. And I wonder if it's very common, because I know the people that have attained PhDs are, at least in my experience, are immigrants. I've found that, and maybe it's just my circles, and not everyone is attaining PhDs, but I wonder if there is that push to get the highest level of education. Um, but then when I've done my research, people who have PhDs are not necessarily the ones that make the most money, for example. As
Mhm.
you said, an influencer is probably making like 10, 20 times more money than someone who holds a PhD, and they have more popularity and significance in a way because people are giving them that significance. Obviously, with a PhD, there's effort, there's hard work, there's intelligence, there's a lot of sweat and maybe even tears that someone has gone through to achieve that.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if, looking at it, and especially if you're growing up right now as a child and you're thinking, why would I get a PhD over being an influencer? I mean, I don't know, seeing your dad have a PhD, if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh. So for me, it's not about having a PhD per se. It's about why do you want it? Like if it's something
Mm.
that's going to further your career
Mm-hmm.
goals and everything, go ahead and get it. If it's something you just want because you feel like you need to have a PhD, um, like, next to your name, if you feel like it's just something for status, or if you think it's going to give you more money, and then I
Mm-hmm.
tell people just stop. But if it's going to
Mm.
further your career, then in all means, go and get it. It's just about, do you know why you're doing what you're doing?
Mm.
So if you want to become like a professor in university, I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm
Mm.
guessing professors usually have PhDs.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so if that's your dream to become a professor in university, then you need to get that PhD. Go ahead and get it. But if you're just trying to
Mm-hmm.
get it because I want to have a PhD in this particular thing, but you're not really going to use it, to me, that's
Mm-hmm.
when it becomes an issue. So it's just about having a purpose for doing what you're doing. Don't feel
Mm-hmm.
pressure to do it because of status, money, or something. And then the money thing, I would probably just say do your research and figure out, will doing this type of education actually help me get more
Mm.
money? Because don't just assume, but actually look into it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just feel like that's where we fall. A lot of us fall short. We don't know why we're doing things. We just do things for the sake of doing things. And honestly, I'm one of those people who I just don't have time to waste on things like that. Like if it's honestly not going to be putting effort in, like bringing joy in my life, or like having a purpose in my life, or useful in my life, I'm like, why am I doing it? This is probably
Mm.
why I never dated when I was in college or something. Because in my head I was like, why?
I
Like I'm not ready to get married or be in a relationship, so I'm like, why? So
Yeah. No, that's
like,
funny. No, I get it. Because I personally know someone who has two PhDs. Two
seriously?
people that are, two people that have two PhDs. Yeah.
Seriously?
Uh, and so people do have time on their hands.
Seriously?
And
I'm like, two PhDs. Wow. By that time, our podcast has got to be like in the millions.
yeah, but that's the thing. Because, to be fair, especially, let's be real, as you said, um the influencer world has definitely expanded, has increased so much that if I have to learn something, I just have to get on YouTube and type in what I want to learn. Even that one
Mm-hmm.
like small specific thing, I just have to type in and then put it into practice over and over and over again and become a master at that thing. Um, and also because a lot of the stuff, like the periodic table, if I had known that I was wasting brain cells to remember the periodic table, I think I would have saved myself and done other things and probably like read more books, like financial books while I was in college instead of remembering the periodic table because who does that anymore?
Those
Um,
poor brain cells. I apologize on your behalf.
wasted. That's what I'm going to say. Ah, wasted, and I'll not get back. However, my 2 hours, 3 hours that I spent when I could have just been doing something else. But anyway, that's life. Um, um, yeah, because that has increased, and I don't know, because at this point, the definition that I'm seeing of education is moving from people who can actually put something together, because now you can easily access it. You can easily access information, but it's not about people who hold information. It's about people that can put that information together to add value to people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because when I think of like the influencer who's telling me how to make oatmeal porridge with like the right ingredients to give me the best taste and flavor, and like that's a vibe. And then I was like, I want to listen to this person. um so those people are actually adding direct value. But yeah, so but as you said, if someone is really passionate about what they're doing, and having a PhD will get them to a better place where they can add more value, then go ahead and do a PhD and enjoy your life doing that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just that I think when you're on the continent, um, I think that when I was hearing the word like work hard in school, get your education, it was without the context of other things that I was also talented at. Um, so, because it was just like, okay, I'll just be in school for the rest of, my life. Until I actually, like I said, Miami University exposed me to other subjects and to even my own personality, because I thought I was this engineer that was going to be straight and narrow and, having a calculator in my pocket. And I didn't have that. So, which is good. And here I am doing a podcast with you, Zell. So interesting.
I know, right? I didn't even think I would do like I never even thought about podcasting before. Like people, I'm
Mm,
pretty sure people be like, Zelda doing a podcast? Because I was very like quiet. Everyone thought I'd probably work in the lab. Um, because I was very quiet
that's
and
funny.
just, and I think the thing is that I don't know, I don't necessarily think I was shy. I just was quiet. But now I've found my
Mm,
like voice, or I don't know. And it's funny, is because like that just being exposed to different things does that to you. And
mm-hmm.
you know, as you said, no one really paid attention to your other gifts, but also it's probably because they also didn't think about it. Like they also raised the same manner of education, formal education, formal education, formal education, and all these other stuff
Mm-hmm.
was more like a not a necessity, because it wouldn't get you where you needed to be based off culture, current times, and all that.
Mm, yeah. And and I think this is a good moment to realize, as we said, like growing up, it's really hard to and challenging to explore who you are, when you're a child, because of just there aren't so many resources and opportunities to do that. And so it's worth realizing that if you do have that opportunity, use it to your fullest advantage, really. I think, which is what we're trying to do at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just use it to your fullest advantage. And when you are given obviously the opportunity to do formal education, take advantage of that, and then find your path to become who you want to really become. So economics is at play, and you kind of just go with what you with what you have. And in that, to some degree, it's also unfortunate to realize that some people are not maybe good at the sciences. They're not good at formal education because the way their minds think
Mm-hmm.
is different. And someone is telling them, you're a failure, you're not like everybody else. And just shout out, if that's you, you're not a failure. It's just that the system you're in is just limited.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a way you can hang on to get to a point where you can find your path and try out other things until you find something that really resembles or aligns with your personality, then just do that. The world is definitely not just and fair in certain areas, and so it's just something to realize, I would say. So yeah. Okay. So top of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
This has been fun. It's yeah. It's always good to reflect on where we've come and where we're going, and I've really enjoyed this, Elle.
Me
So
too.
yeah. Yeah. So, if you guys did enjoy this episode, let us know by hitting the like button on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and subscribe if you want to know when a new episode is listed. So, and if you think there's somebody that you know in your circle, in your social circles, that would enjoy listening to this episode, please let them know. Share our podcast with them. We want to expand our family, and we want to create episodes that are of value to you, that can help you shape your life for the better, and just have at least that seed that can inspire you to do something positive and better for yourself or for others. So please do share and subscribe. And also join us and follow us on Instagram as well. We are growing our Instagram page, so please be patient with us, but just follow us so that you get the most up-to-date information. So this has been fun, guys. Until next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid to be an outlier.